those happy faces. Sorry, I've got a crazy busy day today. So I started with the 2-hour class on Quaky Bird fairies. Now I'm doing this, and then I've got 2 1-hour classes tonight, getting people to get this gun and cuts out of the box. And the last count, 515 people were on that class. So at the end of today, I'm going to be a bit like, yeah, no words left. But I've got words left now, which is good. So welcome to the Pretty Bloomers, Little Potting Club. I can never remember. Pretty Bloomers Club. That's a great one. Andrew's just muted you all so that I can talk to you, because we're going to have to concentrate on this class because we're doing something a little bit different. So I will, any questions, pop it in the chat. I will type up the basic instructions and measurements for you, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I thought we would make this little book. So we're going to make everything from scratch. The book, I'm going to show you how, I'm going to teach you how to resize your charismas, how to make sure your reflections fit your cutting files fit your reflections. And yeah, we're just going to have fun 2 hours. So this little book here, we're making it from scratch. So that's the front cover, and then you open it up and you've got this lovely little book. So it's got all the tunnel that goes in through here, and then all the pieces that come out of here go into the pyramage here. And then the little book is made using a concertina. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. And then when you close it up, it all folds into one, and it can go as a gift or a little ornament or whatever you want it to be. So I thought rather than just putting some cards together, we would do this because it's something different. And we always talk about the fact that when you buy an SVG USB, you've got the potential to resize everything. And this is a perfect example of that, because none of the dies, apart from the teeny tiny ones that you get with your nested, would fit in this. So I thought it was a really nice way of just showing you how we can really make a difference. So when we do a class, we always have a special offer on that you can shop for after the class. So I'm going to get that out of the way now, and then I'll cover it off again at the end. So because the Pretty Bloomers had a USB that had backgrounds on, I had a little bit of an investigation yesterday to see how many we'd had and what deal we could do for you. And also I printed 1 or 2 off so that you could see them, because it's a really nice way of that background. That background for me, when you're crafting with something like 2 Red Robins, takes away all the scariness of a white piece of card, because it gives you that foundation to build the story on. And I think it's absolutely worth its weight in gold, because otherwise you're trying to fill a whole card with stuff. And if you're doing a freestanding one, that's great, but sometimes we want to do something a bit different. So there is a USB, in fact there's 2. One is called the Pretty Bloomers USB, and one is called the Little Potting Club. Neither of them are SVGs, they're both got backgrounds on. And the one that I used yesterday, which I believe was Little Potting Club, has backgrounds on in A4, which you would expect, so you just print them off yourself. So A4, but it also has them in A5, and this is the one that I've used for this class. And it also has them in A6. Now this is perfect for creating your tunnels, if that's what you want to do. So I'll talk to you both ways about, but even if you just wanted to put them in the tins, the Quaker Bird tins, that would be a good one too. And just another one there where you can imagine the little gnome sat at the side of the pond. So the code is Bloomer, so BLOOMER 50, number 50, 50, and you'll get it at half price until Thursday midnight. So that's a good deal. Half price is always good. We like 50% off, don't we? We like half price is amazing. Right, so I've shown you the project. I've told you about the deal. So let's get on with the crafting now. So the first thing we're going to do is make the mini concertina book. Okay, now it might look a little bit daunting, but actually it's really easy. So I'm going to talk you through step by step how we make it. Don't worry about the measurements. Obviously you'll get this sent to you as a link, so you'll be able to watch this class back, but I will write these up for you and get them sent to you on an email. Right, so mini concertina, and I've written myself instructions so I don't forget, because I'm doing that a lot at the moment. So we're going to do mini concertina book. So the first thing we want to do is start with a perforation line, because we have to create those perforation lines to make that concertina. And everybody apart from CM600 and CM300 users will have a perforation line in their scan and cut. Tomorrow, I promise you, I will do a little video. Andrew, remind me, please, when we're doing the Quirky Bird stuff, to do this as well. To show you how to create a perforation line in Canvas Workspace, because it's the simplest thing ever. So it doesn't matter which machine you've got, you'll be able to do this book. All right, because I'm never, ever going to leave the CM customers behind, because that's not what I'm about. So the first thing we're going to do is access the perforation line. So we're going to go into patterns on our scan and cut. Again, doesn't matter which model you've got. I'm going to go into the borders and I'm going to find the perforation line. So I know that on an SDX, you go down to the bottom and then up 3 pages and your perforation is there. So it's code BOB002. I just went to write it down. I've already done it. I'm ahead of myself. Okay, so I'm going to select that perforation line because this is going to be the basis of our book. I'm going to set it on the map first of all, and then I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to go to Object Edit and rotate it 90 degrees so it's vertical. So I've now got one perforation line there. I'm going to make it 122 millimeters high. So I'm going to press OK, go to Resize, and make it 122 high. Now you'll notice there's no width because it's not a shape, it's a line. So there's no width to a line. So that's why you'll always have 0 there. Now I worked out that I want 9 of these to make the size of book that I've got. You can put as many in as you want, but the more you put in, the deeper your book will be. But if you've got something that you really want to go to town with, absolutely, you can put as many in as you want. Every fold that you do will need another 2 perforation lines, and you'll see what I mean when we come to fold it. So what I need to do now is set the distance between the perforation lines, because otherwise they're just going to cut right next to each other. So first thing I'm going to do is ask it to do 9. So I'm going to go into my quantity button and just press the plus till we get to 9 and press OK. So I've now got 9 perforation lines on my screen. Then what I'm going to do is go to the arrangement function. And this is a function that I use all the time for stuff like this. So if I press OK now and keep going until we get to this box here, which is the box that arranges all the lines for you or your shapes for you, I'm going to click on that and that will open up this screen. And wherever there's a little spanner here, it means that there is a toolbox behind it. So there's something behind it. So I'm going to click on there. And pattern interval is the distance between the shapes. So the lower the number, the closer the shapes are together. And the higher the number, the further apart they are. So I've set them for this to pattern interval 5. And if you do this first, when you then use the arrangement function, it will be done straight away. It will put that distance between them. So I'm going to press OK. Top option will rotate them any which way it needs to get the most out of your card, which we're not interested in at the moment because we want them all in a straight line. The middle one will rotate them up to 180 degrees, which makes no difference to us because they're in a straight line anyway. And the bottom option just puts them in a straight row, which is exactly what we want. So we've now got 9 sets of perforation lines vertically in a row. So the first thing we want to do is group those together. So we're going to press OK. And then we're going to go to Edit. We're going to multiple select everything that's on the mat. So it highlights all of them. Press OK. Go back into Object Edit and group it together. So we now have all our perforation lines. Now there is also, so if you look here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 showing. The 8th one is behind that vertical red line, and the 9th one is behind that vertical red line. And that's important that you know that, because what we're going to do now is put a box around it. And we're going to put a box around it so it cuts out the box, and then all the perforation lines are inside. So when we're looking at the size of it, 122 high, which is what we set it at, by 112 wide, that includes the perforation line on the left and the perforation line on the right. And we need to leave a gap between the left and right perforation lines so that we can use it as a tab to glue the concertina together. So I'm going to add a 5-inch square around that because I know that that works. And I do this all the time. I flip-flop between inches and millimetres. I use millimetres if I want to be more precise, and I use inches because I know how big 5 inches is. 122 millimetres, I'm like, I don't even know what that looks like. Inches, I know what it looks like. So I'm going to press OK. I'm going to add, and we're going to go back into our basic shapes, and we're going to choose just a square here. All right, so on this screen, I'm going to change the unit of measurement to inches and press OK. And then I'm going to make that 5 inches square. And again, it can be any size you want. Just be aware that when you're making something that has perforation lines in, if they're, so for example, what we're making right now is this. So you've got your outside 5 inch square, then you've got a slight gap in your perforation lines all the way across there, and then a smaller tab over here. Always make sure that when you're doing perforation lines, they don't touch the top and bottom or the left and right. Because if they do, when you put a square around it, if you don't make the square bigger, it will do exactly what it's made to do. It will perforate. So always leave a gap between the top of the first perforation and the top edge, and the bottom perforation and the bottom edge. That's really important, because otherwise it will perforate and you'll get really frustrated. So I'm going to set this on the mat. Oh, not enough space on the mat. So it's telling me there's not enough space. And it's telling me there's not enough space because on here I've moved this. So if I put it up here and then go in and add the square again, and it's all these little things that you think, why has it not got enough space? It's got enough space. That you start to realise why. The other reason why is because I still had the pattern interval on 5. So when I looked at that screen then, I thought there's loads of room there. Why is it not doing it? Because I've still got the pattern interval set at 5. It's taken into consideration that gap. So it's telling me it hasn't got enough space. It has. We just need to tell it and show it how to do it. So I'm going to set that on the mat. So now I've got room. So what I want to do now is put that inside there. Okay. So we go to edit and we multiple select everything that's on the mat and we press OK. We go to our directional arrows because we're going to move it. So I call this my compass. And then we're going to go to our alignment function at the top. If you're working on a CM machine, CM 300 or 600 or 700, I think, if you haven't got that alignment function, which looks like that, you need to go and update your machine because it was available for you a long time ago. So if you're somebody that's just got it out of the box and that isn't appearing, you need to go and do an update. And to do an update, you go to Brother Solutions Centre UK and tell it that you've got which machine you've got, and it will talk you through the update process. You need a blank USB that's compatible. We sell them on the Highlight Crafts website. So I'm going to press align now, and we're going to put it centrally vertically and centrally horizontally. So now what I've got is if I zoom in and show you, I've got my perforation lines starting here, going right the way across vertically, and then I've got a square that goes around the outside edge. So this isn't perfectly square, the perforation, but the actual square itself is. And that's exactly what we want. Okay, so then what you're going to do is cut 2 of those. Now, a little tip, and I'm not telling you this to sell you something, I'm telling you this in case you've upgraded from a CM to an SDX. The SDX blade is brilliant, but when it's doing perforation lines, it's slower than the original standard blade housing for your CM machine. And the reason for that is because it goes down, along and up, and it does it like that. And it does it really precisely. Whereas this one just does that, just whizzes through it. So if you've still got a standard blade housing and blade from your CM machine, if you've upgraded to an SDX, this is quicker than using your auto blade for perforation lines. Now, when you're only doing 1 or 2 to make a card, it's not too bad. But when you're doing lots and lots and lots of them, if you want to make more of these books, it's quicker. So if that's something that bothers you, put your other blade in. It still works perfectly. Right, so let me show you what we've got now. Okay, so we've cut 2 of those, and I've cut them out of craft card. So what we've got now is we've got a narrow gap here, and then a perforation line, and then a wider gap there, and then the wider gaps continue all the way along like that until you get to the other side, and then there's a narrow one. And that's exactly what it should be like, because what we're going to do now is create our concertina, the left and right hand side of our book. So you're going to start with a valley fold, and I use my scraper here to be able to really burnish this down properly. And that's another reason why I don't take the perforation line to the top and bottom, because when you burnish your card, it can split. So then you're going to do a valley fold and a mountain fold, and you're going to concertina just like you did when you were at school and you made those fans out of cheap copy paper. I think we all might need one of those with this coming week. It's supposed to be very hot again, isn't it? I'm just glad I'm in an air-conditioned studio today. I'm not good at heat. And then I'm going to go along and I'm going to burnish all of these down so they've got nice, tight score lines like that. Okay, we're going to go down like this. Right the way down like that. So we've got one that stands like that. So you can see now we've got that short. If I do it that way, you'll see it better on the overhead. You've got your shorter tab there. Then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, like triangles, little mountains, and then you've got another tab there. So we need to do the same with the other one. Okay, so we've cut 2. So start with your valley fold, and then do your mountain, valley, mountain, valley, all the way along until you've got your concertina. And this is a really clever little way of creating a book that's actually really sturdy, like really properly sturdy. It's great. And I thought this would be quite nice to do something a bit different. Oh, and you could use this with your Quirky Bird designs as well, your fairies, if you wanted to. This would be nice instead of a tin. So it's just another idea. So we've now got 2. So that's going to be the left-hand side one and the right-hand side one. And all you need to do is decide how big you want your book. So you decide how big you want your book, then you decide how long the perforation lines need to be. So they need to be a little bit shorter than the book. And then you just work it from there. So I didn't want it to be square, I wanted it to be rectangular. So the way you make it rectangular is you make this, the top and the bottom, shorter than the left and the right. So it's a rectangle, not a square. And I know you know that, but I have to say it in my head so I know that I've told you. Right, so what we're going to do now is group this together. So you've created this file. You can save it onto a blank USB or into your machine's memory or into the cloud, wherever you save it. And I'm really glad now that we've got the blank USBs on our website because it's really easy to get hold of them now. So I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to group this together. So Object, Edit, and Group, because there's no point creating another one when we've already made it. So the first thing we need to do is make these perforation lines horizontal rather than vertical. And the way we do that is we rotate it by 90 degrees. So we've now got the exact shape that we want for the top and the bottom. So then what we do is all we do is press OK, go to your resize, and all you're going to do is keep the height at 5 inches, unlock the aspect ratio, so you're separating the height and the width, and you just make the width 4 inches, or however wide you want yours to be. So instead of having to go through all the rigmarole of creating that file again, you just make that one narrower, and that's why I love unlock aspect ratio, because otherwise you would have had to do it all over again, which I know it doesn't take very long, but this is the boring bit. We want to get to the good bit, don't we, which is building the book and decorating it. So then you're going to cut 2 of those out. All right, so I've cut 2 of those out, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with these. So we're going to start with a valley fold, and by a valley fold, I mean it makes a V, and I know most of you know that, if not all of you, but sometimes we get somebody who's brand new, because we sold quite a lot of scan and cuts recently. I might be thinking, what's a valley fold, what's a mountain fold? And there was a time when we didn't know what it was either, so it's always worth just reiterating it. So I'm going to My producer's just said I was born with that knowledge. He was born with a lot of things, but not knowledge. Right, so we've now got our top, and we've also, in a minute, we'll have the bottom edge. And this is the coolest little thing, but it makes brilliant little books. And I did one like this with the 2 Red Robins when we first brought out the first SVG USB, but it was really big, and that worked really nicely as well. But I wanted to do this little one, and I learned a lot doing this yesterday. And cut and resizing it and all the rest of it. So I can teach you guys today. And when I'm designing something like this, I always do it really long-windedly. So I do it the obvious route, and then I go back and go, oh, okay, so I could have done that way, and I kind of shorten it down a bit. That's just how I've always worked. I have to go the long way around before I can find the shortcut. Right, so we have now got our top, our bottom, our left and our right concertinas. Okay, so super, super simple, all done on your scan and cut. No scoreboard, no measuring, just that. So we're going to put the left, the right and the bottom together and leave the top open because we need to slide all our pieces in. So the way to do that is you've got these 2 pieces and they've got a tab at the back and a little tab at the front, and then all the V's together. So I'm going to take the first V and I'm going to do it as if it's the top and then turn it around so it becomes the bottom, just because it's easier to work that way because we're on an overhead camera. So the first full V here after that tab is going to go into where the tab is here. It's going to go into there like that. So you get a triangle, you got a tab, then a triangle and a triangle all the way through until you get to the front. So if I do that there, 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 and there, right? And then you put them in and you just wiggle it. Just a little bit. There's a song there somewhere. And that just slots in like a dovetail joint, look, like that. So I'm going to do that again. So the first full V here goes on the front of the tab that's at the back, like that. So V, 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 and they all go into each other like that. And then squeeze them closed. This is the easiest way to do it. So squeeze them shut and have your thumbs about 1 centimetre down from the top, and then just wiggle it. And it just all holds in place. You need glue, so we're going to use our glue. I would recommend the Pimpleur book binding glue, which we also have on our website, hopefully, if it's in stock, because it's got a very low water content, which means it dries quickly. Not too quickly that you can't work with it, but quickly enough that you're not hanging around. As little as possible you need. So I'm now going to glue that tab at the back to the tab that's on the left-hand side, like that. So I'm going to glue that, just the tabs, okay? Because you need that concertina to open out so that you can then slide all your layers in. So I'm squeezing that there, and then I'm going to do the same at the front. So a little bit of glue. And then I'm going to hold that tight. Now, this is where reverse tweezers come in. Just don't do what I've done with mine and bend them. I know, I was trying to be smart. So, you know, when you buy an inexpensive picture frame that you're going to do something magical with, I bought one of those and then tried to pull the staples out with my tweezers and it bent my tweezers. So I need to get some new ones. But reverse tweezers just hold that in place, which is great. That will be ready to go now. I don't even need to have them on, but that's another good thing. So it will make it really quite tight in that corner, but you can open it out. So once it's all dried, I'll show you how easily it opens out. So what we need to do now is the other side. So we do exactly the same thing again. We take this and we're going to go in with the little V's in between there, that way, like that. There we go. Squeeze it together. So that's the tricky bit, but actually when you look at it, it's quite obvious where it goes. Squeeze that in. I'm going to wiggle it just a little bit. Used to drive me bonkers. Now I'm using it. And then that is going to go in there. So that will then be the bottom and the left-hand side and the right-hand side of your frame. Okay, super simple. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on there. And if it's white like that, just take a bit off, because Pinflower Christine would tell you, the less glue you use, the better. You'll have heard her over the years telling the presenters off. Too much glue, Martin, too much glue. Recording this so you can watch it back as many times as you need to, which is great. I love the fact that we do that, because there's nothing worse than going to a class and then you get home and you go, oh, what do we do? So we'll email you the link, which is great. Right, so I'm now going to hold that one in place with my tweezers. Just try and make sure that you get it as locked in as possible, okay, because that's important. You don't want this kind of sticking out here and not quite straight. Just make sure you take the time to make sure that that bit's right. And then the rest of it will be easy. Okay, so I'm just going to let that grab. And I can take that off. And you can see now, as I open this out, look, that concertina opens out. So you're not going to pull it too far open, but you can absolutely open that out, which is great. Because then what you've got, instead of doing a tunnel card, and you know, we've all done it, you make a tunnel card, so you've got the back, and then you've got the concertinas at the side, and then you put your front frame on, and what happens to the sides? They all bow out. With this, it doesn't happen, because it's a concertina, and this part is keeping all this in place. So it's much, much better, I think, than a tunnel card. So you can still do your tunnel cards, but this, look, watch, it's super, super, super sturdy. It's really, really strong. It's a really, really good little book. Right, so I'm going to pop that to one side for now, because we're going to start doing all the bits that go inside it. So this is where I had a bit of a moment yesterday. So, and it was my own fault, and I sat there for about 20 minutes thinking about what I'd done wrong, and then it came to me. So when I went to print these pages yesterday, so on one of the USBs that you're getting your 50% off, you've got the option to print an A4, A5, so you've got 2 on one sheet, and then A6, where you've got 4, which is why I chose this USB for a deal, because I thought that's perfect. So, and then, because I'm so used to printing off reflections, and I'm now working on a Mac, I know, who knew, right? I don't do that much work on it. I send stuff to the printer. That's kind of where I get to. I asked it to scale to 100% because there isn't an actual size option. It says scale, and then I put it at 100%. But by doing that, I made the mistake, because I should have just let it print as it was, because the chimney here stops there and the rest of the bottom picture fit steps there, but the chimney here goes off the page. So I was trying to line up that one and that one. And of course I was positioning the shape, the aperture shape where I wanted it, not realizing that the chimney had gone off and it wasn't lining up. So I had to work a different way around. So I'm going to show you the way that I learned in case you do the same thing. So first thing we're going to do is create the aperture itself. Just put my instructions down somewhere now. There we go. There we are. So let me do a little tick because I'll forget. Right, so because I made that mistake, it came up with something else that I think is really useful. So it says on the instructions to print 4 sheets off, which will give you 8 images. I actually printed 8. Now I know that's quite a lot of printing, but you're not going to waste anything because you're just going to use the others for another book maybe. So you'll see what I mean when I carry on. So the front layer is going to be 4.8 inches high by 3.86 inches wide, which is a ridiculous measurement, but it's because I started in millimeters. So it's 123 millimeters by 198. And then I clicked on the inches to find out what it was so I could put both in the instructions. So if it sounds like a crazy number, that's why. So I'm going to switch back to millimeters because that makes more sense. So we're going to save this file. So you can save that file so that you never need to do the perforations again. However, if you're going to save it, ungroup it first, because you want to make sure that you can use it again. You can separate them if you need to. Once you group something in your machine and save it, you can't ungroup it when you recall it unless you go into Canvas Workspace. So just ungroup it and then save it. Right, so I'm going to close that down because I've already saved mine. We're going to go to Home and start again. So the front layer, so this is the piece, this is the piece that's going to be your first tunnel layer. This isn't the frame that goes on the front like this. This is the piece that's behind it. So this is the first layer of the tunnel, okay? Make sense? So this one here. Right, so 123 millimeters high. So let's just bring on well, first of all, let's go into our settings here and let's take our pattern interval back down to 1. Because if you don't, what GSM card do I use for printing backgrounds? So for printing backgrounds, that's a really good question. Who asked the question, Andrew, please? Linda asked the question. So for something like this, I would use a 240 pure print, and we print it on a laser printer. Now, how much do I love my job? I love my job. Would it bother me if I got sacked? Probably, but I'm going to tell you anyway. We have just sourced a card that, when you print it on an inkjet, gives you a sheen similar to a laser printer. It's going to be October probably before it's in, but we're going to call it Laser Look. So when you see it, you'll know what it is, because we get so many people saying, we like that sheen that you get on yours, and it's because it's printed on a laser printer. So we've sourced some card that we think will do the same thing. The most exciting bit for me is that alcohol inks work on it like Yupo. It's amazing, but you can tear it. Can't tear Yupo, it's plastic, but this you can tear, so therefore you can die cut it. Right, told you, never said a word, okay? Because Stephanie will be annoyed that she didn't tell you first. Although I think she might be in trouble today because she went on air this morning and the tickets for Peterborough came up on the screen at 0 cost for club members. And Janice said, is that right? And I could see Stephanie going, no, I don't think that is right, but I don't want to tell them it's not right. Actually, it's right now, she said. So yeah, absolutely. It's on me. Anybody who's a club member can go to Peterborough free. So if you live near Peterborough and you want a free ticket, she's going to be in so much trouble when she gets home. That's going to be hilarious. Right, so back to this. So pattern, basic shapes. Let's just use a square because it's going to end up a rectangle anyway. So it's the first shape I come to. So let's unlock the aspect ratio again, which separates the height and width. I love that button. That makes this machine so versatile. We're going to take it to 123 millimeters high by 98 millimeters wide. And to get that measurement, I measured, I've got my ruler in here somewhere. There we go, new head. Top to bottom of this. Because I'd done it in 5 inches, I wasn't sure what it was in millimeters. So it worked out at 127 millimeters high by 102 wide. So I just knocked 4 millimeters off because I don't want it to come right to the top. I want it to just sit a little bit further down. And also, when you've created a concertina like this, you can't get anything right down to the bottom because it's not a line and then a space and then another line. It's a perforation, it's a fold line. So getting something right down to the bottom isn't possible. So I thought, right, 4 mil off, that'll work perfectly. So that's where I got the measurement from. So I'm going to set that on the mat. And that's my outside rectangle. So the inside rectangle, I decided I wanted to be 83 millimeters by 58. So when you're doing a tunnel, all the outside edges stay the same, but the aperture gets smaller as it goes back. So the smallest aperture is at the back and the aperture gets bigger as you come forward. Because of the way that I've designed this book, we're going to start with the one at the front first and work backwards. Okay, so this is going to be the largest center. So 83 by 58. So I'm going to edit it. I'm going to duplicate it so that I've got 2. And then I'm going to resize that one by unlocking the aspect ratio, taking it down 83 in the height by 58, like that. Now you can do it all in one, but I prefer to do it so I'm unlocking the aspect ratio because it seems to be a little bit more precise. And it's all to do with the point that it scales in or out from, apparently. That's what somebody who uses Illustrator all the time said. It's the point that it changes from, that it resizes from. So I always do them separately. It's just my thing, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So I'm now going to put these inside each other. So multiple select everything on the mat and press OK. Back to our directional arrows and back to our alignment function. And we're going to align centrally vertically and centrally horizontally. And then we're going to press OK and we're going to group those together. So object, edit and group. So we're now ready to scan this in. Okay, so I'm going to do that because I want you to see how easy this is and why I would like you to print 8 out. If you prefer to do it a different way, it's entirely up to you, but there's a lot of counting involved. And I did it counting first of all, and I thought, actually there's a quicker way. So I've got my mat. This is a very old mat, this one, but I've retacked it with Pinfly stencil glue. Please don't use washi tape on your mats because it leaves a sticky residue around the outside. And the other thing is, if you're sticking a piece of card onto a mat with washi tape, and it's not your mat, you're doing it because your mat's lost its sticky. One of our tattered lace crew's been in this morning and he used my mat and not cleaned it. It's going to be a conversation later on, isn't it? Right, so don't do that. Right, so what was I saying? Scanning, mat, stencil glue. No, it's gone. I do this all the time. You'll have to forgive me at the moment. I've got brain fog. Right, so what I'm going to do is line this up to the left-hand side. All right, so I've printed this sheet off so it's got two of the same picture. And I'm going to burnish this down with my scraper so that it's nice and straight. And I'm going to scan it in so that we can see it on the screen. So we're going to load our mat and scan this in. So yes, going back to your question, 240 GSM. And the reason for that is, I know, so I'm honestly, my brain fog at the moment is really bad. 240 because reflections I'll always print on a 140 because if there's any decoupage layers, you don't want to see that harsh white edge because the scan cut as a straight blade, it doesn't tuck the edge under. For card, and especially for this, because it's going into a tunnel, you need some rigidity in it for it to hold its shape as you're sliding it in and out. So 240 for this. So I'm going to scan this in, just like we would with a reflection. All right, so I'm going to scan it in and wait for it to bring the picture up. So let me explain what I was doing yesterday, and then I decided that that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever done, and this was an easy way of doing it. So I started off by printing 4 out. So even if I'd got this correct without the chimney going off the edge, I created my file, which we just created, I scanned it in and positioned it. And then I thought, right, how am I going to get it in the same place each time? So I took it, in fact, I'm going to show you. I'm just going to show you because it's easier. So you can see now I've got my picture, which is quite pale because I need you to see the cutting file as well. So I zoomed in. Well, I moved this up here first of all. I don't even know why I did this, but like I said, I always do things long-winded way around. So I zoomed in and I scrolled down and I made sure that the bottom of the cutting file was at that point where the two scenes separate. And then I scrolled along across like this. And I made sure that the cutting file was on the edge of the print there. And then I counted 14 spaces up and 40 across because I'd already decided where I wanted my picture to be. And then I counted down and counted across so I knew how many spaces I need to move it. And I cut it out. And then I took the same file and I put it on the bottom one, and I did exactly the same thing again. So if you only want to print 4 times to get 8 images, that's what you would have to do. By printing 8 times, you don't need to do any of that. And the other 4, it's not like you're wasting them. It's not like it's blank space. You're going to use it anyway. So this is the way that I would recommend you do it, because it's much quicker. So I've got my file there. I'm going to decide where I want it. And I want it to be about there, like that. Okay, so I've got the little house in. If I just make the background darker, you'll be able to see a little bit more what I've got. There you go. So I've got the side of the house there with a bit of the chimney and like the little extension going on here. Okay, so I'm going to cut that there right now. So I'm going to press OK and keep going until we get to please select, cut, and then we're going to cut that out. Okay, that's going to do its thing. There we go. I was in the same room as this machine yesterday and I had to keep standing up to make sure it was cutting because it was so quiet. I was like, what are you doing? You're up and down. I'm like, I'm just making sure the scan and cut's still moving. Right, so always check before you take it off that it's cut through, which it has, and then you can unload the mat. Don't move the cutting file, okay? So leave the cutting file exactly where it is. That's crucial for this way of doing it. So I've now got my first panel that's going to slide into my book. So this is going to be the front panel before the frame goes on the front. So that one's going to slide in there like that. Okay, so that's going to go in the front. This piece I'm going to keep because this is going on the other side of the book. So I'm going to pop that one up there. Now, I'm going to take this off and put the next one on, not using the bottom panel. And I'm going to line it up in the same place. So if you always line it up to the top left-hand corner and make sure that the left-hand side of your card is against that edge of your mat, then it will be in the same place, okay? The other thing that you then need to think about is when you're loading your mat in, there is a little, where the rollers are here, the black rollers, in front of them, there's like a little curve, a little lip, plastic lip. And there is a slight tolerance when you put your mat up between the left and the right, and it's a couple of millimeters, but it will make a difference. So line your mat up to either the left-hand lip or the right-hand lip each time you load it. And that way you'll get it bang on. So I'm now going to load this mat in. I'm going to go back to my cutting file, go to Edit, Object Edit, and ungroup it. When you've ungrouped something on an SDX or a CM, you need to tap the screen to release the shapes. Remember I said the outside edge always stays the same. So all we're going to do now for the next layer is make the inner rectangle smaller. And because it's in exactly the same place and we haven't moved it, it will cut the picture, but with a smaller aperture in it. So the second layer, the inner, is going to be 73 by 48. So I go to there. So I'm knocking off 10 millimeters each time, which will give me a 5 millimeter border, which on something this size is a really nice size. Okay, so I'm going to drop the height down by 10, 5 at the top, 5 at the bottom, and the width down by 10, 5 on the left, 5 on the right. So 73 by 48, and then I'm going to press OK. Now, when the scan and cut resizes something that's like this, it resizes it equally. So it doesn't take it from one corner and make it smaller. It resizes it from that point, so it brings it in perfectly. So we don't even need to align it again. We just now know that that's perfect. And because I don't need to move either of them to position it over my scanned image, I'm just going to leave it ungrouped so that next time we do it, we don't need to ungroup it before we resize that. So just to show you, I'm going to ask it to cut that one out now. I don't even need to scan it in because I know it's going to be in the same place. So it's saving you time on your scanning, time on your counting, lining it up. It just means that you've got to print off more than you would have done before. But like this, you've got this whole one and part of one left. So you could probably get 4 books out of 4 books out of 8 sheets. So if you're making to sell, this is a really good way of doing it. Right, so now I've got my other piece, which will now perfectly, she says, okay, sit behind this one. And the roof on the shed there lines up perfectly. So that bit there is what I'm looking at there. That lines up perfectly. And you continue to do that as you go through the sizes, okay? And the piece that you've just taken off this one is going to go on top of that, which also then fits perfectly and is going to go on the other side of your book. So you continue and do that, so you will end up with, let me have a look, those over there, because otherwise I'll forget where they are. Move those out the way, because I'll get mixed up. So we'll have a solid one for the back. Then we have layer 1 that we've just cut, layer 2, layer 3, and layer 4. And each time they're getting smaller. The aperture in the middle is getting smaller. So as you go from the front, the next aperture is smaller, the next one after that smaller, and then the back one is the smallest one. So when we do this, we put all of them together with the background, that every single thing lines up absolutely perfectly in that book. And that's the easiest way I found to do it. So yes, you're printing out something that you might not use immediately, but my word, it saves you a lot of time and frustration. So that's how to do it. Now, if you do the same thing that I did, and one picture goes off the top of the paper and the other one doesn't, just use the same picture each time. So I use the top ones for this, and then I would go back and I would do another book with the bottom ones. Okay, so you know that you're going to get exactly the right thing. Right, so I wanted to show you that because I thought that was quite cool. So once you've got to this stage now, and you've got all your layers, and like I say, I'll give you the measurements. I'll write them all out so that you can then print them off. I'll give them to our lovely Diane. Diane will sort it out. You need a girl to sort stuff out. Diane's your woman. Right, so we've now got our book here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is start to put in our images. So I'm going to start with the back one, the solid one, the full one. And I'm going to put that where the two tabs are here. I'm going to slide it in between the tab and the first big V. Now, it is a little bit tricky, but it does work really, really well. If you hear any strange noises in the background, we're having another warehouse built at the other side of the building because we've run out of space already. So we can have a training academy next year, so you can come and see us and we can do face-to-face classes and retreats, and it's just going to be amazing. But we have to put up with the compound in the ground, so suddenly you'll just sit there and start going like this. The whole building shakes, which is quite scary. Right, so I'm then going to put the next one in, so the one that's got the smallest aperture. And I'm going to slot that in, so I've got one here, and then the next full V, I'm going to put that in there and that in there. And the tricky bit is when you get to the bottom, you need to make sure that it stays on the same side, either the front or the back of the concertina that's here. Because if you get one way and one the other, it doesn't fit properly, okay? And you'll know what I mean. When you start to make one, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know what you meant now. So just take your time. Don't forget, you can open out your concertina as well a little bit. Don't pull it too hard because it will come apart. And you can get it back together, but if we don't have to, let's not. So I'm going to pop that in there, and it's the corner bits. They're a little bit tricky. Once you get one in, you're away. It's because it's not always level when you put it in. Right, so we've now got our picture. And just make sure as you're putting them in that they're still lining up, because there is a little bit of tolerance in here as well, remember? So you can still slip and slide them, which is why I don't glue them in place, because then it gives you the opportunity to move them. And actually, by the time you get the top piece on, you don't need glue. It's really sturdy. So then the next one is going to go in. So we're going to put the next one in the two next triangles, drop it down, and make sure it goes. I always do mine to the front of the concertina at the bottom. So I'm going to push that in there. Like that. Pushing it in one way, there we go. It's making sure it's straight when you push it in, that's the thing. And they'll all line up at the top. So you can just do that and they'll all line up at the top. So again, we're still, look, our picture is still lining up perfectly, which is super cool. Then we do our next one. So that goes in the next set of 2 big triangles. Goes down to the bottom. And then pull that in front of this concertina. So when I get down to the bottom, I've got concertinas here. And I'm making sure that that goes in front of the concertina that it slid into. So, and can you see I'm trying to load it inside wonky because of the way I'm working, because I'm trying to do it so that you guys can see it as well. Once I get it in straight and level, it'll just drop in. This is another reason why I would use 240 GSM, because it gives it that rigidity. And you can see the balcony is lining up perfectly right the way across. And then the last one, which is the frame at the front, well, we've got another frame to go on, we've got a double frame to go on yet, it's going to slide in there. So you'll be left just, it's going right into this front corner. And I thought it was worth doing this one just to give a little bit more sturdiness to the front of the book, because this is something that's going to get picked up and handled a lot. So we want it to be nice and firm. Okay, so we've now got our picture that's going in, and it's a concertina that just bounces like that. So now what we need to do is get the top on, okay, because that's what's going to hold it all together, because right now it's just opening out. But you can see how these aren't splaying because you haven't got that tunnel cord. You've got something holding it together, which is this bit and the bit that we're about to put on. I think it's a really, really clever little design, this. Right, so this bit, starting at the back, we're going to put a full triangle first, and then we're going to go all the way to the front on one side. And this is a little bit tricky because you're fighting with pieces of paper inside it now as well. So just take your time and don't get frustrated with it. If you feel you're getting frustrated, put it down and walk away, come back, because it's worth it. So I try and get both sides in first and then start to wiggle it a little bit. I'm like Stephanie Anna with the painting pages. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. I'll do like, it makes me laugh when I even say that. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Because you can imagine everybody at home when they're painting going wiggle, 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 wiggle. So I'm there now, I think, nearly. Like that. Get in there, little monkey. Wants to fall apart on you as you're doing it. So, oh, not there yet. And you will have this experience, trust me. It will happen. But just stick with it because it's worth it in the end. So let me try this way. This might be easier if I get that at the front. So decide whether you want the V's behind the pieces of paper that you've slotted in, which is easier, or in front. That's it. And then this side is going to go in there like that. Just make sure you do both sides the same. Okay. It's a bit fiddly, but it's worth it in the end. Right, so we're going to do the same thing again now with those tabs. So we're going to start at the back, and we're going to do these tabs first of all. So that's going to go over there. So down here, I've got the bottom one going over the top of the side one. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to put my glue on there. It's warm in the studio today. I should have put the aircon on the glues. So this glue never blocks. It just gets a little skin form on it, like that. Unless you're like me and you constantly leave the lid off it, like a few days at a time, because I've got several bottles on the go, then it dries out. Then I get frustrated because I have to put my tweezers in it, and then the nozzle's not as thin, so then it blocks more. So just put your lid on your glue. My little Alice was in trouble this week because at 2:30 in the morning she was colouring in under her bed covers. Got up to use the bathroom and she was colouring away with the light on. Well, a torch that she pinched off Grandad underneath the duvet covers, colouring in. So said, your Copics. I was like, what? Yeah, I can't tell her off, can I? Not for colouring in anyway. Little monkey. She's funny. Right, so then going to stick the front like this. So again, we're making sure that we've got that nice tight corner, as tight as you can get it, because it looks neater. And then hold that in place while that dries. Like that. And then we're going to glue this one into here like that. And we're not worrying about the fact that you can see this card here because we've got a frame to go on here. So we're not going to worry about that either, because everything gets covered up. Right, so push that in, get that in as tight as you can, and then hold that until that grabs. And then we've got the basic of our concertina book, which is super cool. Right, oh, there we go. So we've now got our book with our pages in, with our picture that all lines up. And you can see there's still a little bit of manoeuvrability, not much because I've only left 4mm, but we've now got our little picture. Okay, it's cool that, isn't it? I love that. I think it's really clever little construction. Right, so the next thing we need to do is do the frame for the front. So the printed frame we're going to do. So when I'd done the front, I thought, right, I like the idea of having, because I've got craft on the outside, rather than just having a printed frame, a picture of the frame that covered the whole thing, I wanted to have the craft on the outside and the inside. So I wanted this to sit on top of the craft, because then it coordinates with everything else in the book. Because this then, you've got that craft border. And if you didn't have it here, it would look a bit odd. So that's what we're going to do now. So let's do the same thing that we did before. And I did have, here we are, frame here. Exactly the same thing as we did before. So we're going to go, we can actually go back to this. All right, so once you've done all your cutting, don't remove that, because you can use that for this frame as well, which is super cool, because you're only doing it once and then you're just reusing it, changing the size of the inside one. So the craft frame, I wanted it slightly bigger. And the reason for that is because I'm going to sit this a little bit further in. So remember when we measured from top to bottom of here? So not this picture, because that's the file for this. We want the file for this. So when I measured from here to here, it was 129mm from top to bottom. So I'm going to make the outside one. Now, if I try and tap on that now, so look, if I've got the top one, the bigger one, highlighted, it won't let me get to the middle one, because the Scan and Cut sees that as a small rectangle with a big rectangle sat over the top. So you can't get to it because it doesn't see it as a frame, it sees it as two separate shapes. So we use these arrows to access the different layers. Okay, it sees it as layers. So the first one, which is the craft card outer, is going to be 129. So we'll go to our sizing box, unlock the aspect ratio and make that 129. And then width-wise, it is, again, from left to right this time, 104mm. And as long as you've got your corners nice and tight, your measurements will be the same, okay? So if you're getting much bigger, it's because you haven't gone tight enough on your corners. And it's actually really, really easy to get. Once you've got the V's in the right place, it's easy to wiggle it together. So we want that to be 104. So the one that I made yesterday and the one I made today is exactly the same measurements, which is good. Right, so we've done the big rectangle, the inner rectangle. So to do that, we go with our directional arrow buttons to that one. Is going to be 83 high. Oh, there we go. Oh, done that wrong, haven't I? So let's undo that. This is an undo button. And I got asked a lot about this one at, we did a little craft fair in Lee on Sunday. And a lady said, how do I go back if I've done something, undo something? And it's that one. It will only undo up to 10 steps, and it won't undo a group or a weld. But if you've moved something and you think, oh no, I don't want to do it, you can undo it up to 10 steps. So that's taken me back to where I was. So I want unlock the aspect ratio, make it 83 by 58. And that will give me a frame when it's cut out that looks like. Okay, so you've now got your frame there. Now, if you were doing this with dies, you'd have your two frames on a magnetic sheet and you'd be wiggling it around with your tongue sticking out, trying to get it dead in the center, okay? And then you cut it. And then you'd have to work out which the next die you wanted to make the smaller outside frame, but the larger inside frame. It's so easy on the scan and cut, it's ridiculous. So we want to make this frame now from this frame. So we make the outside rectangle smaller and the inside rectangle bigger, and that gives you a perfect matte layer. So the printed frame then is 89, because we're making the inner one bigger, and I've done it by 3 millimeters. So you've got 3 millimeters here and 3 millimeters here, which is 6 in total. So we make the height, the small one, where did I go? Where did I say? 83. No, Melanie, 89. 89. And the width, 64. Like that. And then you go to the outside one and you make that one 6 millimeters shorter, smaller. So 123 by 98. So I've even done all the maths for you. And then that will give you this one, and that fits perfectly on top of that. Easy. Super, super, super easy. No messing about trying to line it up, because no matter how many times you do it with the die, it's always a fraction out. That's the joy of having a scan and cut. Even Stephanie admits that that's a really good thing. Normally when we have a discussion about scan and cuts and die, she's on the die cutting camp and I'm on the scan and cut camp. It's quite funny actually. But I mean, I love dies. I use a lot of dies. My Quaker Bird is dies, but we do have a bit of fun, being fun and cheeky with each other. That's why it's going to be hilarious on Friday night, because we're doing the show together. That presenter's ready, because I don't think they've any idea what they're letting themselves in for. Be hilarious. Right, so what am I doing on Friday? I am doing, with Stephanie, the Christmas collection from Two Red Robins on a USB. So we normally wait until we have 4 collections, and then we put them on a USB for you as SVG cutting files. We had so many people contact us saying, please can we not wait until you've got another 4 collections to get the Christmas, so we've put it on for you. So we're doing the Christmas Eve, which was the one that sold out in a record-breaking time. It was ridiculous, absolutely crazy, that show. So we're doing that collection Christmas Eve. And when we launch a die collection, we also launch web exclusives. And the web exclusives, you might have seen them with Stephanie last Sunday. They were like baubles and they had different foliage. And because something is sold out, she put them on the show. We've got those on the same USB as well. And then Stephanie is doing in the same show, the Minecraft Studio Christmas. So Two Red Robins for Christmas on Minecraft Studio. So there's something for everybody on Friday night at 6 o'clock. So 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. And that's why I'm hoping that it starts to rain, because otherwise everybody's sat out in the garden. Well, I'm not. I'm to the telly because I don't like warm. But yeah, it's so if you fancy it, you can join us. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. I don't know which presenter they're going to choose to handle both of us, but it'll be hilarious. Right, so we're now, Stephanie's already thinking that we might have to do 2 shows of Minecraft Studio and 2 of SVGs just to break us up a bit. Funny. Right, so what you're going to do now is just where those tabs that you created there, you're just literally now going to put that over the top of there and make sure that the left-hand side lines up with the spine. All right, so I'm calling this the spine here. This left-hand side lines up. It doesn't matter if it comes over a little bit here, because we're going to make the actual book itself a little bit wider, but it does matter that it lines up here, because when we create the cover that makes the book, you want to make sure that this is exactly level with the concertina down this left-hand side, because otherwise you can't glue the concertina into the spine of the book. All right, so the actual cover. So it's really important that you do that bit. So we've now got that piece. Now you could send that now as a card. You'd put a back on, obviously, which would be really good if you put a back on. So a back on the book like that. And even though the book is actually going to cover the back, I would do a back and then do the cover for the book, just because it holds it in place a little bit better. Okay, so I'll do that when we do that. Mel, would it work if you saved all the files together and then resized them all to a different size book? Absolutely. So you can either do that. So if you're working on a CM machine, that's the way you would do it. If you're working on an SDX, you can just resize each one by a percentage. So if you increase your first concertina by 10%, you increase everything else by 10%. So it depends on which one you're working on. But yes, absolutely, you could do that. And then what I would do is take the files into Canvas. So put them on a USB or save them into the cloud and name them. And then you know which piece is which when you come to cut them again. Absolutely. That's a great idea. Right, so we've got that. So I'm happy with that bit. So the next thing we're going to do is create the actual wrap itself that's going to go around the little concertina piece. I've got my other two pieces, one for the inside cover and one for the front. So I've cut 2 more of those as well. But now let's do this. So the back and the front is going to be 2 rectangles. And I don't think I've cut these, so I'm going to cut them as we go. So we're going to have 2 rectangles at 129 high by 106 wide. So I'm just going to get rid of that one in the middle there, put that in the bin. And I'm going to use this to resize. So let's separate the height and the width, and let's make that 129. That seems quite big actually. Let me just check, make sure. No, bang on, 129 by 106. And the reason that I'm making it a little bit wider is, again, so that you've got this little lip that just comes around. So these look like the pages inside a book. You know, when you get a hardback book and you open it and the pages are slightly inset, that's what I wanted this to look like. And you could do this with all sorts of stuff. So I know tonight on Create Craft there's a Stamperia sale. That's going to be lethal. I've already totted up to about £120. But all the little bits of piece of paper that you've got, maybe you like Stamperia, maybe you like Graphic 45, maybe you've got a photograph, you know, a wedding photograph, something like that. Whatever it is, it will be lovely in a little book. And you could have a whole row on a bookcase of all little different ones, put a spine on. Right, so we've got our rectangle here. So I want 2 of those. So I'm going to ask it to do 2. And I'm going to get it to cut those out for me out of this craft card. Okay, so let's put this on here and let's cut these out. So we've got that, and then I'm going to show you how to create the actual spine bit itself. So, piece of craft card. Can I just say as well, your mat should be tacky so that you can pick it up like this. So David's just in the other room saying that his card isn't cutting through properly. And it's because his mat isn't tacky enough. And it's really interesting because that's the one thing that people complain about the most, is the fact that the mats don't stay sticky long enough. They never will, because every time you put card on and take it off, it leaves fibres behind. But I've also found that the adhesive that they put on a mat, because it's a really thin layer, you can actually see where it's kind of almost laminated onto the mat in the first place. It's sticky, but it's not tacky. I hope that makes sense. You know, when something's sticky, but then you see something that's tacky, and a tacky glue grips more. That's the only way I can describe it, really. So if I touch down here where I haven't stencil glued it, it feels different to where I have. So even on a brand new mat, probably not on a standard one, but on a low tech one, I will put the thinnest layer of stencil glue on, because when I'm cutting something, especially that's thicker like the craft card or grey board, it grabs it better. Just make sure you let it go off for about 10 minutes before you stick anything like that on it. But I do find that really, really helps. And as I was saying before, washi tape, please don't use washi tape. because even if you're sticking it in here and no excess residue is going round here, if the middle of your mat or anything underneath, so when you stick washi tape down, you put it on and you put it round the edge. What about the card that's in the middle that's not sticking to the mat, that then bows when you load your mat and it takes it in and then it doesn't cut properly? Use a stencil glue from Pinflex, authorised by Brother, and it actually does a really good job. And I would rather use less and retact it more often than put a load on and then couldn't get your card off. So please don't do what some people have said, which is pour it onto your mat and then spread it out with a credit card and leave it to dry for 48 hours. That's not how you use it. There is a little video on our website of how to retack your mat. I don't know. Right, so I've got two of the covers, one for the front, one for the back. So I'm going to load this in. I'm going to cut those out. Okay, so we're just going to keep pressing OK until we get to please select and cut. And because I know that on a CM machine, this card would need a pressure of 2 and a blade of 6 rather than a pressure of 1. I know that it's a denser card. It's got more layers that are deeply laminated together. So I put my cutter mount on 1mm. I also do that because my blade's a little bit older. But don't do it on a regular thin cardstock. Please just make sure that you're using it on a thicker. I'd rather you cut it twice if you weren't sure on 0.5. But I know for a fact that this needs 1. The other thing I've got to tell you, which is very exciting, but again, it's going to be a few weeks, is we have managed to source the American Crafts cardstock, or the factory that it comes out of, because right now, trying to buy it in this country is a nightmare, and you're looking at anything from 22 to 30 pounds a pack, which is crazy. So Stephanie and I managed to get some colours, and we're doing it slightly differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to bundle it in colour families. So you'll be able to buy just greens or just pinks and reds or yellows or oranges or browns or whatever. We're going to do it slightly differently because I don't know about you, but I always end up with a load of colours from all these packs after I've used all my favourite ones up. So I thought, well, if we do them in colour families and you're doing Christmas, you can just buy red and green. If you're doing winter scrapbook, you can buy your blues and purples if that's what you want to do. So that will be coming as well soon. And it's exactly the same. I'm very, very happy about, because I was starting to get palpitations thinking I'm never going to get that card again, but we've managed to source it, which is great. Right, so I'm going to pop that over there. So I've now got my front and back cover that is going to go on my book. So I've got the front, and you can see it lips over slightly. Now we've still got to attach a spine to this, but you can see it just lips over slightly, so it looks like a proper book, with those recessed pages in, which I thought looked really quite cool. And we know that that fits perfectly. So now we need to make the spine. And the spine is really interesting because we need to take a rectangle and we need to add some tabs on. All right, so let's go back and let's just get rid of one of those. And let's use this rectangle because we can, because we've got it on our screen. So for the actual spine, the solid piece that goes down, we're going to do it at 129 by 22. And that measurement I got from, obviously, the height, which we've already measured and we know is 129, and the width of this. Now, the width of this at its widest point is probably 19, 20. So I've added a couple of millimetres on. And the reason for that is, when I put this on here, and then I have my spine, and then I have my front cover, I wanted a little bit of distance here in the spine, that extra width in that spine, to be able to put three-dimensional products on here if I wanted to. Whereas if I hadn't, if I'd just done it at the 19, 20 millimetres, you wouldn't have been able to put anything here because it would have meant that your book opened like that. So I've thought about everything as I've gone through it. I would probably keep these quite flat, but even by just building up thin layers, it adds that height. So it's just worth having that extra little bit, I think, personally. So that's that. So let's make this spine. So we want the spine to be 129 high, which it is, by 22 millimetres wide. So again, we're going to unlock the aspect ratio and we're going to make this 22. just going back to the question about resizing the book as well, if you're going to make a really big book, make sure that you use 2 lines of perforations. So what I mean by that is, this is the perforation line that we've got right now, like that, and it works perfectly for this size. If you're going to make a book that's twice as high, all you're going to do is stretch those perforations. And the longer the perforation becomes, the weaker it becomes. So make sure, if you want it to be 8 inches high, do 2 sets of perforation. So take the perforation as it is in the Scan and Cut, duplicate it, and put one above the other. It doesn't matter if they overlap, as long as they overlap perfectly, or you can take it into Canvas and get rid of some of the lines, but don't just stretch your perforation line. It's all right going smaller, because it becomes shorter and therefore tighter. But when you go longer, it's like stretching it, so you're weakening it, and you're making that point weaker. So that's just popped into my head. Random thoughts all the time. So we've got 129 by 22. The tabs are going to be exactly the same height, but narrower. All right, so we need to put a tab here and a tab here to attach the front and the back. So those of you that have been on a class with me before where we've made a 3-dimensional project will know that I use a different shape. So I'm going to press OK, I'm going to add, and I'm going to go into patterns and into basic shapes. And rather than using the tab shape, because again, your tab vertically would be like that. But when you stretch it, this stretches. So that point stretches, then it goes down, then it comes down like this. So when you then come to stick that to a piece of card, this point here, where it joins, and there, the important bits are very weak. So what I use is a rounded corner square, and I make it into a rectangle, because a rounded point, even when it stretches, doesn't move much, because it stretches from the center out. This one, this point here stretches. So I'm going to use BA A002, which is right next to the square in the basic shape, so you can remember it easily. And I'm going to set that, I'm going to resize it. So unlock the aspect ratio. So we want it to be exactly the same height as the spine, so 129. But we want it to be 16. Now, I've done 16 because I thought a whole centimetre is a bit too much, and anything less is a bit, you're kind of going a bit too skinny. So I thought, right, 16. So 16 millimetres wide. So let's do that bit first. So we've now got a tab like that. Okay, I'm going to ask it to do 2 because I want one for the left and one for the right. And I'm going to set it on the mat. So I've now got my plain rectangle, and then I've got a tab that is going to go there and a tab that is going to go there. So let's deal with this one first of all. Now, I don't know whether you all know this, so I'm going to tell you. Each space that you move, so every time you use this button, these directional arrows here, each one of these on a CM machine is 1 millimetre. So every time you move it, you're moving the shape by 1 millimetre. On an SDX, it's 0.5 millimetre, so it's more precise. Now that's a good thing because it's more precise, but it's a bit of a pain because you have to move it twice as much as you do on a CM. So it's horses for courses. Right, so now we know that, I'm going to work with these 2 shapes. So this tab, I want half of it to go over here because it has to weld, and you can't weld something without overlapping it. So we have to overlap it. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that these 2 are both aligned. So we're going to multiple select part of the mat because we don't want this tab included yet. We're going to drag over that, and we're going to align both of these, so directional arrow buttons, and align to the top or the bottom, doesn't matter. So we're going to go to the top like that. We're then going to tap the screen to press OK rather, and tap the screen to release the shapes. And then we're going to align it again. Sorry, I've done that the wrong way around. So align it to the top, and then we're going to multiple select part of the mat, and we're going to align it to the right, okay? So we're going to align those 2, so directional arrow buttons, and align it to the right-hand side, Okay, so we're going to press OK, and we're going to tap the screen to release the shapes. So now I've got the tab on top of the plain rectangle. So the tab is on top of the spine. So I want to move it over so that half of it comes off, so that I can then glue that to the back of the book, and half of it stays overlapped so I can weld it. So as we're working on a SDX, I need to move it 16 times to make 8 millimeters, which is half of the width of the tab. I know that's a lot of words, but I'm trying to explain to you why I'm doing what I'm doing rather than just doing it and giving you measurements. So 16, on a CM it would be 8, okay? So what? Okay, so we've got 16 there. So now we're going to group that together. So we're going to multiple select part of the mat. So if you press all of the mat by mistake, like I did, you can tap the shape and it will release it. So part of the mat, drag it over that tab that we don't want included. And then we're going to group that together. So object, edit, and group. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing with this tab. So this is my fault, my screen's a little, needs calibrating again because I keep working from the side and it pushes the screen out. So I'm now going to multiple select everything on the mat this time and press OK. And we're going to align them to the top and to the left. Okay, so we've now got that. We're going to tap the screen to release the shapes, and then we're going to move the tab. So we're going to go that one. So we need to make sure, do you see how I use those arrows there? So that's the big thing, that's the whole thing, the grouped shape. I just want the other tab, and I can't get to it again because it's on top. So I'll use that arrow, and now we're going to move that 16 spaces to the left. It sounds like a lot to remember, but you won't need to remember it because I'm going to give you all the numbers and the instructions. So we're then going to multiple select, and we're not going to ungroup everything. So this is still grouped here. So I'm going to go to that shape, go to object edit and ungroup it and tap the screen. So now I've got a rectangle with a tab on one side and a tab on the other, but weldable because I've overlapped it. You can't weld or glue, as I call it. It's gluing. You can't glue two things together without them overlapping. Okay, so we're now going to multiple select. Oh, before we do this, we need to create a rectangle for the score line because I'm going to show you how to score on the Scan and Cut. So I've got my tab there, and in the middle there is that plain rectangle. So before I weld it, I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to ask it to do 2. And I'm going to move that out of the way. That's going to become our score line, okay? So now we're going to weld these together. So we're going to multiple select part of the mat, drag over that rectangle, and then we're going to press object edit and weld here. There you go. So I've now got what just looks like a big rectangle, but what it actually is the rectangle that we started with, plus the tab that we've put on the left-hand side, plus the rectangle, and then plus the tab. So you've got that, basically, now, because you've welded those together. Now, I could have just started with a rounded corner rectangle and stretched it, and then put a rectangle in the middle to score it. But I wanted to show you, because most people, if you said to them, right, you're going to make a box and it needs a tab on it, most people that would be the square, and I did it, so it's not me saying that you do something that I didn't do. You would go for a tab that looked like that, because that's what a tab looks like. When you brought that down to there, you can't weld it because it doesn't overlap. And when you overlap it, you end up with a little extra triangle here and it doesn't work. So I wanted to teach you that if you want to use a tab like that, so if you're making a smaller project, you would use a double tab like that. So you'd have a double one, so that plus another one underneath. And then that part can go down there and overlap here. And then that part becomes your tab. So it's interesting when when you start to build files yourself, which is what we did with Made from the Memory, the USB, where I taught you how to build your own files from the shapes inside the machine's memory, that's the kind of thing that you learnt. And I think once you get, and you don't even need, you need to know where all the things are on your machine, but you don't need to be a whiz to do that, because it's all videoed for you. So it's all like this is. So this machine just grows with you and you grow with it, which is fabulous. Right, so I'm happy to weld it. If I zoom in, I'll just show you, you can see slightly that rounded corner. It is very slightly rounded, look. So when that becomes a tab, you're not going to get that weak point. In fact, it's going to strengthen it, which is exactly what we want. Right, so, well, there are different people do it different ways. There's no point putting an embossing tool in your scan and cut and expecting it to score on card, because it just doesn't happen. It will emboss on parchment because they came up with the little squishy mat that you can buy the embossing starter kit. But I don't care what anybody says, if you just put a piece of card on there and run across it with a bowl tool, it will just make a shiny line. Because when you're embossing, you need something to push into when you're scoring, or in the case of Caterpillar Crease, over. Either way, you have to be able to stretch those fibres. And that card has to be pushed into something to be able to stretch it. So it doesn't work with an embossing bowl tool, but it does work with a blade. Now, I do use my CM blade all the time for this, because I know it works, and it works perfectly every single time. So I drop my, first of all, when you're using your old CM blade, and it might be that if you've only ever owned an SDX, you might want to buy one of these with a blade, because you will use it for scoring, especially as we get more advanced with our scan and cut. When you tighten it, I want you to make sure that when it's at its tightest point, that line there under Brother lines up with the number 12 on the sticker. If it doesn't, take the sticker off and put it back on so it does, because that's important, because that's your blade depth. And if your blade depth isn't accurate, as in it should be 7 when it says 5, you're never going to get a good cut, because you're always going to get frustrated because it will be either too shallow or too deep. So that's the first thing you need to do, just for those people who've never owned a CM before and are going to buy one of these. That's what you need to do first of all. And then what I do is unscrew mine and I drop it right down to 1. And when I run my finger across the top, you can hardly feel that blade, okay? Up a little bit deeper, just to make sure that it works. So you can literally just feel it. And then I'm going to pop this in here, because although you can't put that in your CM machine and it won't make it an auto blade, you can put your CM into your SDX. Then I'm going to take this piece of card off this mat, and I'm just going to rotate it round so we can use this piece for our tab. Okay, like that. So on our screen now, we've got our spine with our tabs welded to it, and we need this to be our, oh, go on, there you go. This to be our score line, okay? So the rectangle is going to, straight rectangle is going to be our score line. So to align it up, we multiple select everything on the mat and press OK. We go to our directional arrow buttons and our alignment function, and we align it centrally vertically and centrally horizontally, and that will line it up perfectly. And then we press OK, and we keep going. We go to Object Edit, and we group it. So now I can move that. So I'm going to cut the whole thing with the scoring setting with that low blade. Okay? I love this bit. Someone's asked if I can show them how to calibrate your screen. I can, but it takes a little while, and it's a bit of a pain to do. So I can talk you through it, absolutely. But it does drive you a little bit bonkers. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to warn you now, because it is a bit of a pain in the neck, but I'll see if I can do it. My only concern is that in an hour's time, I've got another free scan and cut class, and if I haven't done it by then, I'm going to be in trouble. But yes, I can absolutely tell you. Right, so we're going to now keep pressing go and OK until we get to please select and cut. So you're not going to see very much, and you must not unload the mat when you're finished. So the settings for this, I've got my blade just about 1, maybe just a little bit above 1. on a CM standard blade, and I've got my pressure, which you set in your cut box. So if I just show you here, because I whizzed through that, I apologise for that. If you go here, into here, that's your auto blade. Your cut pressure on your manual blade, I've got on -3. Okay, so you need it really low because you just want it to cut that top layer. And that will depend on the card that you're using. Because I'm using quite a thick card, I can get away with -3. If I was using a thinner card, I could even take my blade to less than 1. So you just have to play around with it a little bit, okay? So what I want to do now is cut it properly. So I'm going to go to Edit and ungroup it and tap the screen. And now what we want it to do is cut the outside edge because the two vertical lines that we've used from the rectangle have scored it. We don't want it to cut those again. So we're going to use the arrow to get to that rectangle and put the rectangle in the bin. And we're going to take our CM blade out and put our SDX blade in. And by using that, I'm not saying that this doesn't work, but you've really got to work it out with this because you can put half cut on, which is made for vinyl, and then you've got to try and work out, you've got to adjust the auto pressure because it doesn't know you want it to score it. It's easier with that, but you can do it with your SDX blade. And then I'm going to press please select and cut and start because even half cut is too much. It needs a fraction of a millimetre, well, yeah, definitely a fraction of a millimetre to just score that top layer. So it might be worth getting yourself one of those. We are now an official distributor as well, Highlight Crafts for Brother, which is great. And it means that if Brother have mats in stock, we will have them in stock. At the moment, they're out. So if we're out, they're out. But we might have some on the website because I know we had a few at the show at Lee on the weekend. So check that out as well. But we are now officially a distributor, which is great. Right, so I now have this piece, and you can see here that the corners are slightly rounded because I use that rounded corner square. But I also have these two lines that enable it to score. Now that is a really nice knee crease. It's brilliant at doing that with that blade because it's such a fine blade. And it's interesting because when I first went to see Brother when they brought this out, I was a bit dubious because first of all, I wasn't happy that they brought out a new machine. But secondly, I understood why they did it because they'd done a worldwide survey and the one thing that most people wanted was an auto blade. And they were absolutely right. It was the right thing to do. But then I said to them, right, because so you know the snowflake that I used to cut and put on my fingernail to show you how fine the blade was? We did it with that and it wouldn't even go anywhere near it, just scrunched it up. And that's because the blade is stronger, but slightly thicker, slightly bigger, not wider, not thicker, but yeah, a little bit wider. So they've now brought out a vinyl blade for the SDX, which is more or less the same as that. So there's 3 reasons to buy that. 1, it's quicker for perforating. 2, it does the half cut on your scoring, which is, well, it does the scoring brilliantly, I have to say. And 3, it cuts vinyl like a dream. So it's up to you which way you go. But it just made me smile when they brought out a vinyl blade because I was like, see, I told you it wouldn't do vinyl. Quite tiny vinyl. Just don't listen to me. Well, they do sometimes, but yeah, not all the time. And they should, because I use it every day. Right, so I've now got glue. So I'm putting this on the tab bits, like this. And I don't mince my words with them either. So why have you done that? It's like when I went to them with that little spatula that comes with the machine. I'm like, what's that? That's no good. Give me one like this, please. I think they dread me going over, but it's what it is. Right, so I'm lining this up. So this is the back of the book. Like that. So that's going to go there. Just make sure when you stick it down that when you fold it over, your score line is flush to that edge of that card. So it looks really nice and neat and professional. We don't do wonky unless it's meant to be. Like that. And then your next piece, which is that piece, yeah, is going to go on here. So, Now I've got that glue on here, and again, you'll see what I'll do. I'll put glue on, and then I'll take my finger and I'll wipe across it, because it should be almost clear. If it's almost clear, you've got enough. If it's white, thick white, you've got far too much. So again, I'm going to line this up to that score line that we used our blade for, making sure it's level, like that. And then I also use that to burnish it down as well. So we've then got our perfect little book with our spine. So that's our cover for our book. So then you're going to take your book. Now, I've already told you should put a back on there. So do as I say, not as I do, please. And then I'm going to stick this into here. So I'm making sure that the concertina here, when I lift the side there, that it's butted up to there. Okay, so I've got it stuck flat at the back. And then when this will dry, it'll open out. So before you glue it, just fold the front back and burnish it, because you're going to need to do that at some point. Okay, you need it to fold back, and it's easier to do it now than it is when it's got the concertina inside. So I'm going to be really naughty and just do this. So I'm going to put glue down here, like this. And the other thing is, once you've got a back on it, which is what you should do, it gives you more place to put glue. Because if I put glue on here now, it's not going to touch that because it's got this ridge. So make sure you put a back on it, okay? Same size as the outside of the frame at the front. But I will write all the, well, they're all written up. I just need to type them up and give them to one of the team upstairs. Make it make sense, because what makes sense in my head, it's completely bonkers to them. Because I write in scan and cut speak. So I'm going to put this in here first of all, like that. I'm going to make sure it's level. Not to get glue everywhere, Melanie. And then I'm just going to slide it out and slide it back in to that spine there. Okay, so I'm going to press that down firmly. Now, if this was a concertina card made with the normal way, the sides would be popping out and all sorts would be going on, but this top bit here stabilizes it. It's really clever. I love this. I love this construction. I think it's brilliant. The next thing I'm going to work on is like a living hinge, you know, the ones that curve. I think I nailed it. I need to test it. Right, so we've now got this, but we've got this spine. Now it's up to you. You can put glue on here so that that stays like that, or you can keep it left open like that. It's entirely up to you. I like to put glue on it. And rather than trying to put glue on the concertina bit, I'm just going to put glue on this bit. Because trust me, it's much easier. And yes, there'll be a bit of glue that won't touch the card, but it actually doesn't really matter because it is what it is. Now glue up here, like that. Christine will be saying, you've got far too much glue on there. I'm like, I know, Christine, I know. Right, so I'm going to rub some of that off. And I'm going to push that into there. So now you can stand your book up like that and put some pressure on it like that. Okay, and leave that to dry. Just leave it to dry properly. All right, it's worth it. Don't try and mess about with it now because you'll get really frustrated because that spine gravity just wants it to come open like that. Whereas if you do it like this, press down firmly. Actually, that's grabbed pretty quickly. So you've now got your book. So then you need a piece to go on here. And that piece, again, is exactly the same as the piece that you've cut for your page. So when you do your front and back, do an extra one to go on the inside, because then it covers over that tab. So you then have your nice little book that folds up like that. It's super cool. I love this. I think it's really clever. Right, and that's not me saying I'm clever. That's me saying that the mechanism, that's the word I'm looking for, is clever. Right, so last thing I'm going to show you is this bit, because this is cool too. So we're going to take one of the backgrounds. So I cut, remember when I showed you how to do it over the picture? So you lined up your picture in the same place and scanned it in. This is what we're going to do with this bit now. So all these bits that have come out of here, or the one that I did yesterday to show you, all these pieces here are now going to lay back on top of here. So we're going to make sure that we're lining it up. So the way that I do it is I choose a couple of points. So one here is the chimney, the vertical line that's coming down from the chimney. And the other one down here is these little stones. It's supposed to be stones around the window. There's a little bit of it on here, and I'm making sure that that lines up too, okay? I'm not worrying about whether this is lined up because I can always trim a bit off that if I need to. But I am thinking about the actual picture itself because that's the bits that's going to be noticed. So then we're going to take some, I brought 3D foam in here. I know I did. Okay, you would do it with 3D foam. Can't find my 3D foam. Where's that gone? I definitely brought it in. I don't think I took it back out either. Okay, not to worry. We'll do it with glue gel. Don't do it with glue gel because it'll squidge. Okay, do it with foam. So I'm going to take, I had it on this morning. Yeah, we'll email them out. We'll email you the measurements out. Somebody's asked how we'll get the measurements. We'll email them to you. Okay. Is that you volunteering to do it, Andrew? We'll sort it out for you, promise. We'll get Sean on it. Sean's a good man. Sean will do it. Right, so now I'm going to position this over there, okay? And I wasn't sure whether this would work because I thought surely when you've got all the little decorative bits, it's going to push those back in, but actually it doesn't, it didn't, it worked really well. I don't think that's one of them. I think that's from one today. So then I've got my next layer there, which this time I am looking at, because I haven't got the chimney now, so I'm looking at the edge of the roof and I'm looking at the triangle at the top there. So as long as that triangle lines up perfectly there, the rest of it will follow suit. And then let's put this one on because this is a different positioning point. So just find a couple of points. It doesn't matter which they are. For this one, I'm going to use the balcony and the roof again. The roof's probably quite a good one. Like that. And then the last one is going to go on there like that. So I'm just using the balcony and the bottom of the roof line there. So the balcony and the bottom of the roof line there. And then that is going to stick on the inside of there. And then believe it or not, even when it's decorated, when you fold that, now the best way to do this sticking, got that, this is the most important bit, and then I need to tell you about reflections. The best way I found is to put this in here. This is another reason why I use foam tape. Put that on there, so it slots in. Then hold it down and gently put your glue on, like that. Close that over, press that down, cross your fingers, hold your breath, and open it out. There you go. And then we've got that in exactly the right position. You can adjust it slightly because there will be a little bit of give and take. And just keep making sure that it opens and closes like that, which I think is fab. Just going to line that up a little bit better because it's not quite central, because there will be a little bit of room, a little bit of give. As long as your book closes like that, you've then got that perfect. Okay? And that is how you make your little book. And then you go ahead and decorate it. Now, I'm not going to decorate it because I want you to do that. And I think I'll take a picture of this. I'll get a close-up photograph of this taken. Andrew will do that for us. And we'll put that out for you. But I used all the stuff from Little Potting Club. I did think it would be really cute with the garden gnomes. And I was going to do that, and then at the last minute I bottled out and changed my mind because I thought no, I wanted it to be more gardener based, because I thought if you're not a gnome person, you might not want to make a book. So I've got all the little sweet peas and all the little snapdragons and the little forgotten flowers, so the forget-me-nots, and the little birds and the basket and the hat and the gloves and the secateurs, and this is the trim off the hat. So I wanted something like a little corner piece that would just bring it all together. So let me show you what I did with our reflections yesterday, because I had to play around with this too. So normally when you shrink this down, so Let me find one this one, for example, hers here. This is a simple one. So normally you would print off your reflection. It would print off that way, and it would be one piece on here on an A4. When you shrink it down, so you shrink it down at your printer settings. So when you go into bring your reflection up, and then you send to print, your print will open up a box that says actual size or 100% or fit to page. It will also give you a percentage box. So make sure originally that it's set on either 100% or actual size. Don't do fit to page because your cutting file won't fit. And then in your percentage box, reduce it or increase it. You can only increase it if you've got an A3 printer because that's the only size up from an A4, but you can make it smaller. So when I did it yesterday and sent it to the printer, it asked me how many copies I wanted on one page because it could fit more than one. So I asked it to do 2. And I'd never done it before, so I thought, right, let's see what happens. So it did 2, but it rotated the reflection that way to be able to fit 2 on. So I was like, right, okay, so now I need to think about how I change the cutting file to make sure that it matches with the reflection. So this is what we do. So I'm going to just put this one on here on my mat so that I can show you properly. So I'm going to position this top left again. It doesn't have to be top left or top right. It just needs to be straight, because if it's not straight, you're starting to rotate your cutting file and you don't want to be doing that. Not when you're lining something up like this, it's not easy. Right, so USB needs to go into the Scan and Cut. And whenever I work with a USB like this, I have a blank USB and I keep it in the same container with the one that I'm working with. So every time I do something like the book files and I want to save it, or I change a file, or I do something, I weld it, or I make a shape card, I save it on a blank USB and I pop it in the box with that so that I know where it is. Because otherwise I end up with loads of USBs and I'm like, what's that? So when you put USB in, it will flash. When it stops flashing, it's ready for the machine to read. So I'm going to press home. And this time we're retrieving data from the USB. And at the bottom of your reflection page, it will tell you the name of the collection. So Little Potting Club. So you go into Little Potting Club. It'll tell you the file name, which is hers. And they're all in alphabetical order. And when it comes onto here, you go into your reflections. Excuse me. And we do 01, that's the first page. This is the second page. So 01, 02. And that's your file. So we're going to set it on the mat just the way we do as normal. Edit it to group it together. So multiple select everything on the mat. Press OK. Go to Object Edit and Group. And then the next thing you need to do is measure one side of your rectangle. And I found that trying to do it as a percentage didn't work because it's changed the orientation. And because I asked it to, because I had it at 100%, when it rotated it sends the size out a little bit. So I just measure one side of the rectangle from top to bottom. So this is 172 millimeters. I don't need to worry about the width. So I'm going to resize that to 172 high, and then the width should take care of itself, and if it doesn't, you just adjust it accordingly. But I thought this was a really cool way of cutting smaller things but maximizing the paper that you're cutting on. So if I load this in now, because there's nothing worse than wasting that paper. So if you can fit 2 on, why not? Right, so I'm going to scan this in from here, just like you do with your normal reflections. Okay, I'm going to make this background lighter so I can actually see the cutting file, and then I'll make it darker when I've lined it up. So I'm just going to move this up, and all we're doing is lining up those two rectangles, just the same as we do normally, okay? You just have to move it a little bit further. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in to 400%, and I'm lining up that corner, this corner here of the red rectangle with the black rectangle. Now you can see here it's a little bit wider. So all we're going to do is go to Object Edit and Resize, unlock the aspect ratio and drop the width down by a couple of mil, and then zoom in again. And it's a little bit more work, but it's worth it to get the most out of your card. And then I'm just going to nudge that over there like that. And you can see when I'm not looking at this corner now, what I'm looking at is all this here. So I can see, and I'll just make it a little bit, I'm going to drop it down one more. I'll just make it a little bit darker for you so that you can see it as well. So where am I? Background. And then I'll zoom in again. Worse. So let's make the background lighter again. Oh, melon. Let's zoom in again, and then you'll be able to see better. So you can see that as long as those flowers, so you can see where that flower is there, that's within the pink area. There is a bleed around everything. But look at this flower here. So that curve there and that curve there fit perfectly around that flower. And once you've got that, you know that everything else must be in the right place because it's all made together. So then all you do is go to Object Edit and duplicate the reflection. So you've got two. And then you move that over. Come on, move. Oh, you little monkey. There, like that. And you move that over there, and you line that up in exactly the same way, and then you cut them both out in one go. And it's that simple. So then you can make them smaller. And it's lovely, isn't it? Because, you know, when you see two red robins with dies, the cards are quite big and they're full and they're three-dimensional, and that's amazing. And we can do all of that with the Scan and Cut. In fact, we can take the matte layers and weld them to make a shape card and then lay all the pieces over the top, which you've seen me do before in different classes. But smaller is just lovely. So rather than, you know, I mean, let's face it, cost of living's going through the roof. If you can make somebody a gift like that with maybe a pocket on the back that you could also make on your Scan and Cut. So you could use the concertina to make the little sides of your pocket so it's got some depth, and maybe put in a little voucher for a garden centre or some seed packets and make a gift. For Christmas this year, I'm doing all handmade gifts. I'm not buying anything. I'm just going to make all handmade stuff and purpose it and make it specifically for the person that I'm gifting it to. So it's really personal. And I think that is a lovely, lovely idea. But then if you're stuck with what to put in it, you know, because I mean, I don't know about you, but when I first started crafting, I used to buy Cane Company scrapbook kits and everything came in it. And you had all these little bits of stuff left over. You could absolutely use all those up. Maybe you could stamp it. You could use your fairies. Whatever it is, you can create these little pictures, and that is a gift. Put a little spine on and cover the back, or put a little gift on the back. I think that's really lovely. Or maybe even put a gift card inside. Use it as a presentation box if that's what you want to do. So that's what I thought. All the things that we can do, because we can make things smaller and bigger, is just brilliant. So let's take advantage of it. Right, I'm going to see if I can recalibrate my screen now. This might be fun. You might see the other side of me now because the air might turn blue, but I'll try my best. So you've got to switch it off, first of all. And you don't need to do this very often. So this calibration is for when you're trying to touch something on your screen and it won't quite grab it. And it happens more often than not when you're using your stylus sideways. So where you can, or even worse, your fingernail, which I am a nightmare for doing, try and use your stylus full on because it pushes the screen out and it just affects the screen. You can do it, which is what we're about to do now, but it is a faff. I'm not going to lie to you, it's a faff, and it can be really frustrating, but we'll try our best. So weirdly, you put your finger on the screen and you switch it on, and you keep your finger on the screen until the brother sign disappears. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. There you go. So it goes away, and your touch panel calibration screen comes on. Now what you've got to do is touch the cross in the right place on all these 5 points, okay? And it will tell you when you've been successful. It'll also tell you when you're not successful. So, ready? You might want to put your hands over your ears if it happens more than 10 times. So, number 1, 2, oh, it might do it for me today. Number 3, number 4. It's telling me there's a point error, so I have to try again. So I have to now start again. You have to go through all this until you get to number 5 and it says success, by which time the machine's nearly gone through the window. But you have to do it, so it's one of those things. If you do this a few times and it doesn't work, you might need to contact brother. And you might need to, I know Andrew's laughing in my ear now, I did warn you, it's really frustrating. You might need to contact brother and get them to look at your screen. Because sometimes if you've pushed it out too far, you can't get it back. It doesn't like number 4. That's because it's that side that's out. Right, let's try and see if we go, right. See what I mean? So you keep doing this until you get to 5. I'm going to keep going, because if I've got to suffer this pain, you've got to suffer it too. Oh, see? No, it doesn't like 2 either. I'll still be here at 6:30. See what I mean? So you have to keep going through this painful process until it says success. So thank you for that. It's fine. Right, I'm going to try again, and then I'm going to sign off and just sit here until I get it to work, because it's not going to do it for me, but it will do eventually. But it is a little bit painful, so unless you absolutely have to, don't do it. All right, if you're touching your screen and it just will not move, you can use your directional arrows, but if it's driving you bonkers, then you do have to just suffer it, I'm afraid, and you have to do it until it says yes. So not computer says no, Scan and Cut says no. Right, thank you everybody for joining me. I will get those instructions written up tonight and put on the, we'll send to you tomorrow. So you'll have those. And I hope that I will, first of all, see you on Friday when Stephanie and I run out together, which will be very fun. And if not, I will see you on the next class. Jennifer's got a hand up. Do you want to ask a question? Can we? Oh, there you go. Yes, please. No, can you email me, Jennifer? Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, love. Yeah. All right, brilliant. Thank you. Oh, go on. Andrew's putting what? Right, so the passcode and the what? And the meeting ID. See, I don't do Zoom. Can you tell? I'm like over my head. I'm just putting this stuff in the chat for tonight's classes that you need to get in. But if you're already on a Scan and Cut, tonight is absolute beginner, like out of the box, switching it on and making a first cut. So if you pass that, you don't need to join tonight's class. It's about the people that have still got it in the box or on the shelf. And I want to get them out of the box because I want everybody using their Scan and Cuts to their full potential, because it's brilliant. And I get really passionate and quite evangelical about it, because just cutting a few shapes is not what this machine's about. It can be absolutely your little crafty world, and you can do so much on it that is just undiscovered. So yeah, we'll see how we get on tonight with all those people who've never taken it out of the box. And I will see you next time. Thank you. Take care. Lots of love. Oh, code is Bloomer 50 to get half price off those backing paper USBs. So go and check them out on our website, highlightcrafts.com, and pick up a blank USB if you need one. Take care.